Wait. Before we start, just want to make sure we're clear here. While this podcast talks about sobriety, mental health, and addiction, it is not meant to replace professional medical advice. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety.
I'm Kathleen.
And I'm Sonia.
And we're ex-sisters-in-law, brought together in marriage and bonded through our sobriety journey.
Join us as we talk sobriety, addiction, and everything in between. You're in for quite a ride. And our Substack is buzzing with amazing content, from creative mocktail recipes to insightful courses and reflective exercises. There is something for everyone. Don't miss out. It's a great way to add some extra joy and depth to your journey. Check it out. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Patti Clark, an award-winning author who explores personal transformation and recovery. Her latest book, Recovery Road Trip: Finding Purpose and Connection on the Journey Home, is such a beautiful blend of memoir and travelogue, and it chronicles a solo journey across America following the death of her alcoholic father.
Through this narrative, Patti explores themes of addiction, healing, and self-discovery, offering inspiration to those seeking purpose and connection in their own lives. Her insights have been featured in publications such as the Wall Street Journal and the Boston Globe.
Drawing from her personal journey and professional expertise, Patti provides a unique perspective on recovery and the transformative power of embracing one's authentic self, which we love here. Hi, Patti. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you so much. I love that introduction. I just want to steal it and put it on my website. It was beautiful. Thank you.
We love a good introduction here.
You do a great one.
So, Patti, can you talk to us a little bit about your early life and upbringing?
Sure. I tend to be a bit verbose, so I'll try and keep it manageable. I was raised in an incredibly dysfunctional alcoholic home. My mother was the identified alcoholic and was the one that was looked down upon, shall we say. She died of alcoholism when I was 16, which was incredibly painful and shaped a lot of my life. My father was also an alcoholic, but he looked good, right? He drove a nice car, he wore a suit, so he was okay. And what I learned is a lot of what Gabor Mate talks about, which is that with trauma, we try and quell the pain. And my sister and I both learned how to do that in a way that makes sense considering our family. And so we started drinking at an early age. My dad left our family home, left my mother, and, his last words before he left were, "Think about Jim Beam." And then he left. That was the day before Christmas Eve. And I was 12, my sister was 16, and my mother's alcoholism just devolved. This was the 60s, early 70s in San Francisco, so there was a lot available. And so I found out real quickly at 13 that drinking and drugging would ease the pain. And so I did it to excess from the beginning. I was blackout drinking by the time I was 13 and 14. And once I was in high school at 14, I was taking any drug available, and they were all available then. And I was really lucky in that school came easily to me. And so I was able to do well at school, even in my insanity. And I went to Berkeley, and I graduated and, did okay. And then ended up driving up to Alaska after I finished university, and I became a bartender at Red Dog Saloon, which was kid in the candy shop, and not real safe. And then I ended up with my boyfriend, who's my husband now, who was not a drinker. I was enjoying listening to the podcast previously about the woman who was talking about how to be in a relationship if one gives up alcohol and the other doesn't. I thought that was really interesting. I never had that experience with Jeff. And anyway, he went to Australia and messaged me in Alaska and said, come and meet. He didn't message me. He sent an aerogram. There was no messaging back then. He said, meet me in Bali. And in this same week, and this was definitely my higher power working in my life. The same week, I had two things happen. I got offered a full-time job teaching, and a woman I was teaching with um, had a condo next door to her that went up for sale in Alaska at that time with the oil pipeline money. You could get a loan, interest-free loan from the government. And so I could have bought that, had a job, and also bartending, which was making me stupid money. Or I could leave everything and go travel with Jeff. And I sat crying on a log, looking out at the water in Juneau where I was living, saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I heard this voice. I mean, I know I sound crazy, but I heard this voice that said, leave. If you stay, you're going to die. And I just said, okay. And I left. And that really shifted my whole trajectory. And I'll get into getting sober and stuff in a bit. You asked for the early parts.
Yeah, wow, that's very you said you heard that voice saying, "If you stay, you're going to die." What else what else was pivotal in your
It's a
path to
real
recovery?
there were a couple of them. The first one was that Jeff and I did stay together, and as I said, he wasn't a drinker or a user, so he and I fought about my drinking because, as I said, when I did drink, I drank to blackout always. I was the life of the party. Everybody thought of Patty is so much fun, and gosh, she can drink everybody under the table until I'm the one that fell under
Mhm.
the table. And so Jeff and I had lots of arguments, and so I was constantly making, these agreements with him and to myself. I'll only have this much. I'll only drink that much. I'll only drink at this kind of occasion, blah, blah, blah. But when we decided to have children, I said, I am not going to be my mother.
Mhm.
And that was a hugely pivotal point. Another really important point was my sister got sober 2 years before me. This was just before I was 30. So she got sober in 86. I got sober in 88. And my sister, who had been my drinking and using buddy, took me to my first AA meeting. But I went to quote unquote support her, and
Mhm.
that she brought me along, just to show me, little nudge, my older sister. And so I had that it was in my world, I had the idea. And we would talk about our mother and just how catastrophic it was, etc. So before I got sober, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I had my sister who was already in recovery, who was able to talk to me about it. But then this bizarre thing happened. My husband and I were living in Ashland, Oregon at the time, and I went to an astrologist who was a psychic and astrologist. And so she did my astrology chart, and she looked at this and she said, this is an interesting, whatever it's called, triad area. Is there much alcohol in your family? And I said, oh, yeah. My mother died of alcoholism when I was 16. She said, okay, this makes sense here. But there's still this. And I said, well, my dad is still an alcoholic. He's still practicing. She said, okay, yeah, well, that makes sense. She said, but there's still more. And I said, well, my sister actually is a recovering alcoholic, and she's been in recovery for a while. And she said, yep, that all makes sense. And she just put her hands on the table and looked me in the eye and she said, but Patty, are you an alcoholic? Just like that. No, talk about confrontive. It was wow. And so I started sobbing. I burbled. I eventually ran out the door and said to Jeff that happened and I'm stopping drinking. And the next day I went to my first AA meeting.
Mm.
Wow. There's some powerful about your sibling quitting. So my brother got sober 8 years before I did. My brother, who was married to Kathleen. But it just having that like out in the universe, like was always like, "Mm, I might have a problem. I might have a problem." He was like the first person I told that I thought I had a problem. And so, yeah. And I said it in a weird way. I said, I haven't had a drink in a week. Do I get a chip or something?
Mm.
And he was like, what? And I said, I think I might need to go to AA.
Well, there was never really a question in our family. Education was highly valued, and so my father used to say, "Not are you going to go to
Mhm.
college?" It was, "What college are you going to go to?" He used to buy us stocks for put it in our stocking, at Christmas and say, this is your education fund. And this is your present as you're growing up. However, if you don't go to college, you don't get any of it. So there was, it was always, sort of in that guise. My mother had gone to Cal. My sister went to Cal. My aunt went to Cal. So it was always that I was going to go to Berkeley. And as I said, I was really lucky. Formal education was relatively easy for me. Um, and so I was able to go to Berkeley, and this was in the 70s. And it was, there were a lot of parties, there were a lot of drugs, and that informed a lot of the time at college. But somehow I managed to, graduate in 4 years. And, I was ambitious. So I was taking a lot of drugs. I was drinking way too much booze, but I was still ambitious. I still knew I wanted to do more. And so I got a master's in education. I became a teacher, and I focused on things I wanted to do even while I was drinking a lot.
And what role did travel play for you, Patty, in your personal growth and recovery? You
Yes.
started before we came on to say you're living abroad. I'm not. So how did living in different countries shape your worldview and approach to recovery?
It really did a lot. As a matter of fact, without jumping ahead, it's what eventually led to my relapse. But
Mm.
I don't want to digress too many directions. But to answer your question, which will also lead into relapse, Jeff and I, when I left Alaska, that was in 1984,
Mm.
and he he and I traveled around Southeast Asia and Asia. I got a job teaching in Japan and taught English in Japan. And in a way, that was uh, part of the Japanese culture was to be very honorific to sensei. And so we'd go out as a class and they would always be pouring more sake or more beer or more whatever. And so I kind of decided, well, if I'm not pouring it, then I'm not really responsible for how much I drink. They're pouring it for me. Of course I can't count. Anyway, it was a real heavy drinking culture in Japan. Then we traveled some more. We came back to America in 88 and or 87, and then that's right before I got sober. I got sober in January 88 when Jeff was going back to finish his bachelor's. We ended up in Tucson, Arizona, and it was a fabulous place to get sober. It was the center in the 80s of the whole dry, recovery group. There were so many rehab centers in Tucson, Arizona. It was amazing. So when I got sober in this um, powerful group of women. I went to a women's meeting. There were 30 women there, mostly 20s, 30s, maybe a few in their 40s, powerful women. And it just held me, supported me. It was amazing. And then we moved to New Zealand in 1992 before we had our kids. And we in a small town in New Zealand. And I went from this powerful community of women to this small town where I went into my first AA meeting there. And it was full of old men who were big book thumpers and saying, just don't drink, go to meetings, you'll be fine. Literal pounding of the big book. And I'd cry and go, but I'm not fine. I need more. And I was looking for the richness that I had felt in this other recovery group that I didn't find there. And eventually, I pulled back from my recovery community in New Zealand, and I eventually started drinking again.
Wow. So before we talk about relapse, can we talk a little bit about how you define recovery? So is it abstinence? Is it moderation? Is it about healing or something else? And or has that definition even changed for you?
I find it morphs a lot. It does change a lot. Recovery for me initially was absolutely um, getting sober and not drinking because moderation was not an option for me. I tried to make the agreements with myself. I'll only have one drink here. I'll only drink 2 glasses of wine at this get together. That kind of moderation thing just never worked for me at all. Um, so recovery for me definitely meant abstinence from the beginning. And as I said earlier, my sister was my role model initially, and she was in AA, so that was also a piece of it. Um, but as I was sober longer, and this is where I'm talking about that morph and that change, the longer I was sober, I was realizing it's not just about giving up alcohol, because then you're just not drinking, and yes, life gets better. And as we know, alcohol is carcinogenic and it's killing us. So there's that. So just the health side of not drinking is really important. But for me, I was seeking emotional sobriety, emotional growth.
Yeah.
So when I got sober, I started doing a shitload of therapy. I mean, I was just doing so much therapy. I was in psychodrama groups. I was doing one-on-one. Jeff and I did couples counseling. I did other group therapy, a women's group. I did a lot, a lot. I did hypnotherapy, and not to get sober because I was sober at that point, but in order to grow and emotionally be able to deal with life. Because as you guys know, when we stop drinking, the shit doesn't stop. We just feel it
Mhm.
more. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, now I don't have anything numbing the pain. So all of that trauma and all of that stuff that I had is still here and coming
Mhm.
up, but I can't numb it anymore. So dear God, help me. I need a major help here. So I needed a lot of therapy and a lot of help to get to a point where I could live a life I wanted and not try and numb out from it.
So, Patty, it's really interesting you're saying that. Like, I really hear the themes of personal growth and transformation in alongside your sobriety. Can you can you tell us a little bit about the relapse? You said you went to New Zealand. You didn't have the supports that were present, and then did you just start drinking again, or what happened?
No, it was gradual. Basically, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jonathan Hari, but he's got a great quote. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Love that
Yeah.
quote. Um, and so what happened is I pulled away because I felt no connection in this recovery
Mhm.
community anymore. None. I felt alienated and outside, and I was like, "Shit, what?" So I kept reading recovery-based books. I
Mhm.
still did prayers and meditation, but I didn't have that community. I didn't have those people around me. But what I did have around me was, and part of the reason I got sober the first time, as I told you guys, was because I didn't want to be my mother. So
Mhm.
when I was pregnant, breastfeeding, while the kids were young, I didn't drink at all. Then all of a sudden, both of my kids were at school and I had time on my hands, and I was running workshops for teenagers, which was great, but I didn't have the kids at home. But what was happening in this small beach town in New Zealand was that all the mothers got together after school, brought the kids to one house or another, sat out on the deck near the ocean and drank great wine. And there I because I mean, New Zealand was known for its great wine,
Right.
and, it's not my fault.
It's not your fault, Patty. They
Not my
have good
fault.
wine.
I mean, who can argue that? Anyway, so I didn't have the community of recovering people, and I was looking for community, and there was this community of mothers with kids my age, and they were all getting together after school, and literally one time I just said, "Oh, fuck it." Sorry, guys. I don't know
Mhm.
if the
No,
swearing's
oh, go
okay.
ahead.
Okay.
Sonia swears like a trucker.
Good. Okay, so yeah, I literally said, "Fuck it, this is crazy. I'm fine." I mean, that was it. To be honest, a big part of my relapse was arrogance. Huge
Mm.
arrogance on his huge part, saying, "I'm fine. I've got this." I still say the third step prayer from 12 step. I still read recovery books. I do my prayers and meditations. I'm good. I've got this. So
Mhm.
I started out, making these agreements with myself. I'll only have one glass of wine after
Mhm.
school, blah, blah, blah. And if somebody else fills up my glass, it's not my responsibility. So all of this stuff. I was sober for almost 13 years when I had my first drink. And
Wow.
and I went out and drank for 13 years. So I was sober for 13, I drank for 13, and now I've been sober for 10, a little over 10 years again. So it was substantial. And in the beginning, just to answer your question a little more broadly, I was very careful. I didn't get drunk. I really kept tabs on it. I understood, right? I can drink like a normal person. I understood how to do this. And I did until I didn't. And I guess the first clue for me was I had been drinking again probably for a couple of years. And I finished off a bottle of wine and I thought, well, I don't want Jeff to know that I finished that
Mhm.
bottle of wine.
Mhm.
So I hid the empty bottle underneath all the rest of the recycling. And I thought, ooh, this isn't
Yeah.
good. This isn't good.
No.
And so, but it didn't stop me. So I was drinking for 13 years until I got sober again. And it progressed. It went up, it went down. I gave up. But I didn't have a recovery community. And then one day in this small town I lived in, my second son was about to go to college. And my first son was already at college, and my second son was about to go. And I thought, wow, with the kids gone, I'll have a lot of time to drink, which was, yeah, a little red flag there. And I thought, this is really bad. And then
Mm.
a guy walked into the coffee shop that I was sitting in with my son, and I recognized him from the 13 years previously from recovery. He was one of the younger guys. And I saw another woman walk in with him. And I thought, oh, she's cool. She was wearing this really cool dress and she had this wild white hair. And I thought, oh, she is really cool. And so I walked up to him and I said, hi, Stan. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Patty. And he said, oh, of course I remember you. And then I said, wonderful to see you again. But actually, I'm not here to talk to you. I'm here to talk to her. And I looked at her and I said, are you in recovery too? And she said, sure am. And she said, my name's Rosie. And I said, hi, Rosie. And I said, I am just really, really looking for a women's group. And she said, let's start one. And we started a women's group, and I found community, and we started it, and it's still running, you know,
Oh, wow.
11 years later. Although now it's mixed because there were a lot of men that said, that's a great group. Can we join you? So they did. And now it's co-ed. And we agreed that when we were starting it, we would do a lot of focus on emotional sobriety
Yeah.
because so much
Yeah.
of what was happening in the other one was there was a lot of focus on the newcomer and, here's how you do it. And that's great. And that's necessary. But we wanted something that was more all encompassing.
Sonia and I talk a lot in our podcast about emotional sobriety. It comes up a lot just
Yeah.
because we've had experience personally, right, with people who are physically sober, but not emotionally sober.
Yeah.
I'm not always emotionally sober.
Mhm.
Yeah. I do think, I mean, I don't know, Patty, if you agree. I think that does typically precede a relapse. So I know if I'm not emotionally sober for, more than a couple of days, it's a little bit dangerous for me.
Mhm. Absolutely. And you have to have the right people around you to even know what that means, you know?
Yeah.
In a lot of recovery circles, you can say, I feel emotionally disconnected. I'm looking for that emotional sobriety. I'm looking for that depth. And in a lot of circles, you'll hear, I just keep coming to meetings and don't pick up. And it's like, no, that's not enough.
Mhm. No, it's not enough, I don't think. And so, how did you use relapse as a learning experience rather than giving up? And how do you think other people can use it as a learning experience?
And that's a great question. That's a great question. Well, first of all, one of the things I used it for is I started asking other women,
Mm,
why did you relapse? What
mhm.
brought you to it? Because I'm really curious. I'm curious by nature.
Mhm.
And so this was during COVID, and I was going to all of these Zoom meetings, and I would listen to people, and if they mentioned relapse, I would private message them and say, "Do you mind talking after?" And I was asking all these women, and I was taking notes about why women relapsed. And I was looking specifically at the role of relapse in women. I know a lot of men do too, but I was very focused on women. I was curious for personal reasons. And I wanted to learn because I didn't want to do it again. And so that's part of what I was doing. Another thing was, and that I got real clear on, and this was a huge learning moment for me, is right at the end of my drinking after the relapse, I just looked at myself in the mirror one day and said, "Ew, I don't like you when you're drinking. I don't like you." And what was hugely poignant and significant about this was that I got sober the first time because I didn't want to be my mother. I wanted to be sober for my kids, and I wanted to be sober to keep my husband because we fought so much about my drinking. And, those are good reasons and etc. But this time when I got sober for me. I
Mm,
My health was suffering. I was sloppy. I didn't like it. The hangovers were hell. After a certain age, hangovers just were brutal. And I started learning more too about how toxic alcohol is and just thought,
Yeah.
this is horrible. Why am I doing this to myself? I don't smoke cigarettes because I know it'll kill me. Well, this will too. So
Mhm.
that was another big piece was I did it for me and then so learning and then I wanted to learn more about what it was doing for me. And then I wanted to learn why other women relapsed. And then what happened was I had taken all these notes. I was so interested. And then I started getting these little taps on my shoulder, my intuition saying, "Okay, it's time to write this down." And I was like, "No, no, I'm not going to. I don't want to write a book. I don't want to write a book because it's hard."
Yeah.
But I ended up collating a lot of the information that I got from women. That's what Recovery Road Trip really is. It's not really a memoir, although I'm in it. It's more pieces that I had learned from all of these women that I interviewed. And so all of the aspects of Meg, the protagonist, and the people that she meets on the journey are really women that I had interviewed and learned from.
Mm. Mm.
yeah.
Amazing. That is amazing.
So, from talking to all these women, do you have a different view of what like recovered is? Are we ever recovered? Do you label yourself an alcoholic? How do you look at that idea? Like, is it one day at a time? Do you not know what the next day holds? Or what do you think?
Um, well, I am in a 12-step program. So because I'm
Mhm.
in a 12-step program, that does read into this question. I identify myself as an addict rather than an alcoholic because I think that alcohol is an addiction and the drugs I took were an addiction and
Mhm.
shopping's an addiction and sex
Mhm.
is an addiction and food is an addiction. And whatever we're doing to get out of our discomfort that we go to because we're like, I'm not comfortable. And so we start grabbing at for me, as it's been identified, Gabor Mate and others have identified, it's an addiction, and that I want to live a life where I'm not choosing to escape my life. So in that circle, I'm looking at all of those addictions. So yes, I identify as an addict, and that my addictions pop up, little whack-a-mole addictions, depends on what's going on. Politically, it's absolutely insane in America right now. I mean, it's just so distressing. Um,
Yeah.
and so addiction for me shows up in different ways around that. Sometimes it's like getting glued to a screen because I can't take my eyes away from the train wreck, you know,
Mhm.
and that really unhealthy. And I feel the toxicity in my body when I'm on the computer for hours.
Mhm.
Um, ah, I talk to a lot of women who have talked to me about porn addiction with their boyfriends and partners, and that addiction of wanting to escape that way. Gaming addiction. Anyway, I digress again. But I do identify as an addict. For me, I know it is ongoing because it does pop up. I don't think I'm ever, well, you know, universe willing. I don't think I'm going to drink again because I know too much. I know that it's toxic as hell, and it will uh, really hurt my health. Same reason I won't pick up cigarettes again. It's
Mhm.
like I know too much. It's not
Mhm.
something I want to do at all. Not to mention, I love the recovery community I have. I feel I thrive there. But other addictions, I still find myself addicted to screens sometimes. I still will, impulse buy because I'm uncomfortable in my skin. You know, yeah, it pops up.
That really resonates with me, Patty, because I am not an alcoholic. I never really had a I had a semi-problematic relationship with alcohol. I don't drink because of I do believe it's poison, but I had a drug problem. And, but there are other like what you said about the whack-a-mole, like food has come up. Sonia knows this for me. Food, shopping, there's also, and I see it in my practice all the time as a therapist, like porn addiction is so prevalent and gaming. And like, it is really the not the inability in that moment to stay present with discomfort, right?
Yeah,
Like, and
yeah,
so consuming whatever it is. And so I really resonate with what you just said is you identify as an addict that's in recovery, but like many things can come up. And I feel that for myself. Like alcohol was not my issue. Drugs were, but there are and other issues that I
yeah,
have.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, drugs were mine too. I was
Yeah. Yeah.
there was many drugs, and I was definitely addicted to cocaine for quite a while in Alaska,
Well,
where
that was my issue.
yeah, yeah, and I'm in Alaska, I was bartending, and that's how a lot of people tipped, and it was what I found myself doing was
Good thing I wasn't in Alaska in my 20s. I would have been dead.
in the back behind the bar, like in the back room where we stored stuff, and they'd lay out a couple of lines, and that would be my
My
tip, and
gosh.
I knew who was carrying, and so even though I never was a prostitute in that sense of the word, but I knew
Mhm.
who was carrying, and when they walked in, my smile got bigger, and I poured
Mhm.
them a heavier shot, so I was playing this game because I knew what I was gonna get. I knew the guys that were coming off of the fishing boats that had just been paid and that were gonna drop $100 note on the bar, and so I was definitely cuter, sexier, playing that role. So there's, yeah, sliding scale on there.
Mhm.
But absolutely, and addiction is addiction, is addiction, is addiction, and I get
Mhm.
so pissed off in 12-step rooms where they say, "Oh, no, this is AA. If you wanna talk about
Mhm.
that addiction, there's that room over there, and oh, no, you can't talk about that here, that room over there." That's such bullshit. Addiction is addiction is addiction, it's like, come into a room and talk about your longing for getting real and healthy. Don't tell me to go to another room because you're only
Mhm.
focused on alcohol. In my opinion, that is absolute bullshit. And I'm codependent as hell too, so I've
Mhm.
I've
Yep.
I've got them all played out. So it's yeah, I identify with all of it.
Actually, speaking of 12 steps, so neither Kathleen nor I are in 12 step. We have a lot of respect for it. But was there a point where you realized that traditional 12 step wasn't fully addressing your
Yeah.
needs?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that was when I went to New Zealand. And that's exactly what it
Mhm.
was. This pedantic, patriarchal, just
Yes.
closed minded group and there was nothing else in my small town. Whereas the room that I got sober in Tucson, they were, multi addiction, young women looking for emotional sobriety in that largest sense. And that's what I was yearning for.
Mhm.
And I read, have you guys read Quit Like a Woman, Holly Whitaker?
Mhm.
I have. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. It's a great book. And I read that and I thought, yeah, it's so much more than 12 step. I'm not turning my back on 12 step because that spiritual side speaks to me. It
Yeah.
really does. That spiritual, that deep meditative side really speaks to me. The pedantic, big book thumping bullshit does not. And so when Rosie and I started the meeting in the town in New Zealand, we started it under the banner of NA and basically said, this is addiction. Any addiction you got, you come to this room. It's fine. You talk about whatever's up for you. And people have come in with a lot of meth addicts, a lot of alcoholics, shopaholics. Most people have many. And the truth is if
Yeah.
you're identifying as an addict, yeah, that whack-a-mole thing, we're all carrying a lot of them. So,
Mhm.
and now that I'm in Portugal, I've been here for about a year. I went online and I'm in a sort of a group forum, and somebody mentioned recovery, and I private messaged her, or actually I private messaged him, and he said, "Well, there's a woman not far from you. Let me ask her if I can give you her info." He did. She said, "Okay." I messaged her. We got together, and we're starting a group here that is going to be open and all addiction. It is 12-step, but it's whatever you identify, come on in. Addiction is addiction is addiction. And we're
Mm.
looking for that connection.
Mhm. That's amazing. I love hearing you talk, Patty. I love your spirit. It's amazing. Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you. I know at times I can be too verbose, so I try and
No,
check
no.
myself.
I'm like getting all like pumped up, like, yeah. Mm.
Thank you. Thank you. That's in the book, in that part of my book, Recovery Road Trip, I talk about fusion recovery. And
Mhm.
I this is what I heard from a lot of women and what I heard on a different podcast when I was saying, I can't deal with people that, talk about alcohol and then say, go to another room if you want to talk about your codependency or your addiction to drugs or whatever else. That makes me crazy. And instead, I want someplace where we can come together and explode and make it bigger. And the sum of the parts is so much greater than the whole.
Mhm. Like, kind of further to what you've been saying, and you said for you, the 12-step, like, the spirituality piece is really valuable for you. Like, what other aspects of 12-step do you find value, and how does that incorporate into fusion recovery?
The community, the
The
connection.
community.
That's
Yeah.
it. Because to me, that is just like, Johann Hari's quote that
Yeah.
that, that's where I found my recovery is through connection. And that I need that. I need that connection. It's vital. And if you find the right room and the right group of people, I have
Mhm.
never had an experience like this where I can walk in and I can vomit all of my shit all over the
Mhm.
floor, and they'll just leave it there, and it's fine. Nobody's going to um, tell me not to, or this is how you do it, or shh, 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 or no,
Mhm.
make me crazy. And in not all 12-step rooms, but many 12-step rooms, there is a level of acceptance and tolerance, honesty and openness that I have honestly never ever found anywhere else. But
Mhm.
the truth is, you have to find the right room, or else,
Yeah,
as I
right.
as I keep doing, is I keep creating it
You
because
create them.
I'm not going back to those pedantic big book thumping bullshit
Mhm.
men mostly saying,
Mhm.
but I crave that connection, and
Yeah.
I have found it in 12-step rooms, the right 12-step rooms.
Well, I feel like, I don't have any stats on this, but I'm assuming that as our world becomes less collective, right? Less community based, more individualistic, more and more and more, even as like I feel like every day we become more and more individualistic, and at least in North American societies, I feel like that connection is even more crucial, is even more important. And, just in my practice, I just see addiction being so prevalent, even though people don't call it addiction, but it's
Mhm.
there. And it's really this like lack of community, this like staring at the phone, not connecting with their partners, not connecting with their friends in that way. Like I'm seeing it. It's an epidemic, I
Oh,
feel.
hugely epidemic. Working with teenagers, it's just
Mm,
heartbreaking, absolutely
yeah.
heartbreaking that you'll have a group of friends together all on their own phones, and maybe they'll show each other the clip that they're looking
Right.
at. but that's what sharing becomes. And the really scary thing to me is the brain science, how
Oh, I know.
brains are changing because of that, that
Yeah.
instant gratification, that quickness, the lack of attention span. Yeah, and we are all seeking connection. And so you find people like going back to social media looking for that connection because we're
Yes,
craving that connection, but all it's doing is creating more isolation. It's a vicious, terrifying circle.
it is. It is. How do you define the importance of taking pauses in recovery? What
Mm.
does that mean for you?
Well, for me, it's quite specific, and I use the word pause, like sacred pause, more than like I'm pausing my recovery because that's
Okay.
not true. That's
I'm
that's
just
not what I'm
taking a
talking.
day off of my recovery and I'm
Exactly.
gonna go do some
Oh,
lines. Bye.
exactly. Just a few, and it's only today. I'll be back tomorrow. So I just really want to be clear on that. That's not what a pause of recovery means, but a sacred pause of for me personally, I mean, it means different things for different people. For me
Yeah.
personally, I have always been really fast. Like my brain works fast. I can, if I'm trying to do too many things at once, I really become a whirling dervish, a
Mhm.
Tasmanian devil, and I go from one place to another and don't get anything done and whirl. And it's like I really see it. And a sacred pause for me is like take a breath,
Mhm.
step back,
Yeah.
absolutely disconnect from everything. And I do that in different ways. Uh, the first way, the simple way, is literally breath and removing myself from whatever it is I'm doing. I
Mhm.
do yoga, meditation. I I have learned to take that moment away, step away. In the workshops that I used to run in New Zealand, I used to talk about a sacred pause with the students and telling them, okay, what we're going to do now is just do a very simple exercise of closing your eyes, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, out for 4, out for 4, wait for, just the breathing square. It's
The
got
box
different
breath,
names.
the box
Box
breath.
breath,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, that's so simple, but
Mhm.
every single time we did it in every workshop, the kids would say, wow, I feel different.
Mhm.
And it for me, it's really physiologically, I feel my heart rate slow, I feel my brain clear, and I can
Mhm.
step back. And for me, that's vital. I can take that's just during the day, many times during the day. But I also need a pause from things for longer periods. Like I may say, I'm having a pause from my phone for a chunk of time, whatever that chunk of time is, or a pause from, different things where I remove myself. I also, most of the time though, it literally is more of a sacred pause of closing my eyes, breathing, removing
Mhm.
myself for however long, and that's vital to me. I also
Yeah.
pause through with creativity. I find creativity
Mhm.
absolutely vital in my recovery practice.
Yeah.
Sonia, how do you
So
think you pause?
that's a good question. I feel like I'm not the whirling dervish, so I don't feel like I always need a pause, if that makes sense. I also don't overbook myself. So I was gonna say, I'm not like you where your day is so structured. Like you probably need to
Like me.
schedule in a pause. Yeah, my
Mhm.
life is not like that, where, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm scheduled every hour, like on the hour. How do you take a pause? Because I think you are sort of, right?
Yeah, I am a whirling dervish. And I overbook myself, double book myself, and I would say nature,
Mm,
nature. I have to like even I'm in Canada and it's dark here in the morning, but even at like 5:30 in the morning, I'm out in the dark walking my dog safely, everybody, but I am and I need it. I need it. And then I try to do it in the middle of the day, even if I just step outside and take a breath of fresh air. And then I also try to do it at the end of the day. And I am not okay if I don't do that.
Mm,
Mm.
Hmm.
absolutely. Nature for me too. I live on the beach in Portugal, and there's a beautiful walkway that just goes right next to the ocean for kilometers in both
Hmm.
directions. And I walk that absolutely every day just to get to hear the sea, to smell it, to be there. And
Hmm.
I feel it physiologically. I
Yes.
Yeah.
do.
It's so interesting. I was walking, it had snowed here, so very different than the beach, but it had snowed here the other day, and it was puffy snow, lots of, like, grainy, puffy snow, and it felt like I was walking in the sand. Nothing had been plowed or anything, and I was like, "Wow, I really feel my body sort of, like, I don't know, resting in nature by doing this." Like, it was like I was walking on a beach, but I was walking in the snow. It's so important.
Absolutely.
I agree. I think that I'm sort of like immersed in
You
nature,
are,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. I sort of like, it's almost like living in a forest,
Where
right?
are you,
Of my
Sonia?
I'm in Pennsylvania, in rural
Okay.
Pennsylvania, but, the other day, so I have a creek, behind my house, and it's been frozen for probably like a month or so,
Oh, wow.
and it's really quiet and, like, really secluded, and so when I walk outside, I don't see anyone, and, I went outside, like, in my pajamas with my dog, like, 'cause I don't see anyone, and my neighbor was skating down the creek in front
What?
of my house.
No. Really?
Yeah, and I'm
Um,
like in like pajamas. You never have to do that at my house, right?
No.
And he was like,
Top of the morning to you. Just gonna skate on by.
it really shook
mm,
my equilibrium. Um,
mm.
Speaking of, obviously, I'm pretty solitary person, but Patty, you highlight community, and so what advice do you have for someone who feels isolated in their sobriety? How can they create deeper and more meaningful connections?
That's so much easier now than it used to be. Um,
Mhm.
ironically,
Yes. All right.
it's
Yes.
um, there are a lot of communities now where people can online, that's the irony, right? Online communities that don't depend on 12 steps. So there's 12-step meetings every day, every hour of every day, everywhere in the world. And you can find middle of the night, you can find a recovery community online. And it's all the schedules are all online. But there's also women's groups. There
Mhm.
are other sober curious groups. There's so many groups of people that you can connect with to find connection. And again, I think that is so essential to identify others that are interested in it because in a um, society everywhere I've ever lived that is obsessed with alcohol, and that's everywhere I've been and lived in.
Mm.
It's if you are looking to find community outside of that, you really do have to make a concerted effort.
Yeah.
And perhaps that does begin online, and then maybe you'll meet people that live near you from that. Like I did. I found people online here. I found people close to me here, but I found them online first. Um, so again, it's like making that technology your friend. But it doesn't have to be 12 step. You can find connection in a lot of different ways. Quit like a woman, she has a group online. There's several groups, women or mixed or whatever, where people are talking about it, where people are sharing their experience. And yeah, I think that that's vital, to find someone that can share your experience and therapists, there's that's also
Mhm.
a really important place to begin, really important because that would be my main message to anyone is you don't have to do it alone. Whether you
No.
identify as an addict or not, whether you're just curious about what it might feel like to not drink, whether your health is suffering, whatever it is, you don't have to do it alone. There's a lot of different areas, and I think therapy is a great place to start personally because it has to start as an inside job, in my opinion.
Well, I'll take that plug. I own
Yeah.
Kathleen Killen Psychotherapy, and I'm accepting new clients.
Absolutely, and that's the first thing I tell anybody that I'm talking to is, yes, there are
Yeah.
places that you can absolutely go. However, it's equally as important to find that power within.
For sure. What advice do you have for navigating friendships when your social life was once centered around alcohol? What happened to the mommies on the beach? Did
Oh,
you
they're
leave
still
them
on the
behind?
beach drinking.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I became a, uh, whatever it's called, yeah, uh, they were uncomfortable around me because
Okay.
when someone's not drinking
Yeah.
around you, then you're the
Right.
one that's making everybody else see what they're drinking, right?
Yeah.
And it's very uncomfortable. And people will often come and say, "Oh, I've given up. I'm cutting back on my alcohol,"
Mhm.
or "Oh, I've noticed that." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, well, good for you."
Mhm.
Okay, I'm not your keeper. I don't really care, but okay. And if they're really asking for help, I'm there and I'm happy to
Yeah.
help. But but, yeah, they kept drinking and just didn't invite me anymore. But I forgot the question, sorry. What was the
Well, how
question?
do you navigate friendships when
Oh,
you
friendships.
Yeah.
A lot of my friendships that I had when I was drinking, they just disappeared,
Yeah.
absolutely
Mhm.
disappeared. It just was that way. But a lot of other ones that were very close to me did not. I mean, I still have the same close friends for years and years and years. I had drinking friends, and then I had other friends that I've had for years that were different. But the ones that revolved around drinking, oh yeah, they just dissipated. They just disappeared. We had nothing in common. Their
Mhm.
jokes weren't funny. The stories got old. That it was like, this is boring. So, it
Mhm.
was important for me. I'm not speaking for anybody else. It was important for me, and it was important with a lot of the women that I spoke to that we had to n break away from some of them and develop new habits. If
Yeah.
if you're if you're going to the same wine bars or places that's where you used to socialize, then that's a problem.
So, Patty, what are you looking forward to? What are you working on right now?
Um, so what's new mostly is living in Portugal. It's been a year, as I said. Still trying to learn Portuguese. I have a grandson, so that is very new and exciting. And that's another gift of sobriety. My kids, had I been
Mhm.
drinking the way I was drinking, my kids would not want me around. They
Mhm.
just wouldn't have.
Uh-huh.
So that's a real gift. And I have one son in Glasgow in Scotland and one son at the moment in Geneva where he's working, but he's moving to Barcelona with his partner. And so I do a lot of travel to see my
Yeah.
kids. And I'm still doing a lot of writing articles either for my Substack or writing articles for some publications and developing life here in Portugal with yoga. I have a book club. I have a recovery community. So I'm 67. And so at 67, trying to create a new life is time consuming.
Yeah. I think you're gonna be my inspirational goal now, Patty, because
Thank you.
honestly, that is how I wanna be living my life in
Oh,
in 20 years is still engaging in meaningful work and building community, living abroad, traveling. You're living my dream, so thank you for being an
oh,
inspiration to me.
oh, oh my God. Thank you
Mhm.
so much. What a beautiful thing to say, Kathleen.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for coming on the show, Patty. It's been such a pleasure to have you, and thank you all for listening to Sisters in Sobriety, and we will see you next week.
This was Sisters in Sobriety.
Thank you for listening and being with us today.
If you want to learn more about sobriety and meet your community, find us at sistersinsobriety.substack.com.
Are you a sister in sobriety? Then reach out on social media. We'd love to hear from you.
If you're feeling generous, leave us 5 stars and a review and follow us wherever you listen.
You'll never miss an episode. Until next time.